My dad called me the mistake at his birthday party. His new boss was my former college mentor. My dad called me the mistake at his birthday party. His new boss was my former college mentor. The words came out of his mouth like they were nothing, like he was tossing an ice cube into a drink. Well, my dad said, raising his glass and grinning at the little semicircle of people around the dining table. We all make mistakes, and mine sitting right there. He nodded toward me, and the room did that awful micro-freeze where everybody's smile pauses mid-face. It was his birthday dinner, candles still smoking on the cake, and I was holding a paper plate with a slice I hadn't touched because my stomach was already twisted. My cheeks went instantly hot. I felt the blood drain from my hands like my body was trying to protect the important organs and abandon everything else. My dad chuckled and added, "Relax, I'm kidding," but he didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at the guests. He wanted their laughter more than he wanted my dignity. I didn't do the movie thing where I stand up and flip the table. I stayed seated because my legs went heavy, like someone had poured wet cement into them. My fork scraped the plate without me meaning to, a small, ugly sound that made a couple people flinch. Someone, my aunt, maybe did a nervous laugh that died immediately. I heard my mom inhale sharply across from me, that sharp breath she does when she's about to scold him, but decides not to because she's tired. My dad's new boss, this tall woman in a navy blazer who'd been smiling politely all night, stopped smiling. Her eyes shifted from my dad to me, and she looked confused, then focused, like she was trying to place a memory. My dad kept going, waving his hand like he was brushing away any discomfort he'd created. He's always been sensitive, he said. That's why he didn't last in sports. That's why he ran off to college and thought he was too good for us. Then he took a sip of wine, satisfied, like he'd just delivered a toast that proved something important about himself. It was a Tuesday night a few weeks earlier when my mom called me and said, "Your father wants you to come to his birthday dinner." She said it like it was a request, but it had that weight to it, like if I said no, I would be the one making it a thing. I hadn't been home in months, partly because work had been insane, and partly because going home feels like walking back into a version of myself I've spent years trying to outgrow. Still, I said yes because my mom sounded hopeful in that small, fragile way that always makes me cave. She told me my dad had invited a few people from work because he just started a new job and was excited to show off. And she said it like it was normal, like it wasn't a red flag that my dad needed an audience to feel real. My relationship with my dad has never been warm. That's the most polite way to say it. If I'm honest, it's been a long, slow lesson in learning how to stand in a room with someone who seems to genuinely enjoy making you feel smaller. He's not the obvious villain type. He doesn't scream constantly. He doesn't hit. He doesn't disappear. He's the kind of dad who can be charming to strangers and cruel in private. The kind who calls it joking when you flinch and calls you dramatic when you finally speak up. Growing up, he liked to tell people I was the sensitive one, like that was my core identity. If I cried, he'd smirk and say, "There he goes." If I got angry, he'd laugh and say, "You need thicker skin." I learned early that every emotion I had would be used as evidence against me. So I started making my face neutral. I got good at swallowing things whole. I was also an unplanned pregnancy. That's not a secret in our family. It's a story my dad tells like it's funny. "We had your sister. We were done. Then surprise," he'd say at barbecues like I was a late bill in the mail. People would laugh. I would smile with my lips and feel my chest go tight. When I got older, I asked my mom once if he meant it. She looked tired in a way I didn't understand at 12 and said, "Your dad doesn't think before he speaks," which is another way of saying, yes, he means it, but we're not allowed to call it what it is. College was my escape, but not in a dramatic, I'm never coming back way. More like a quiet, stubborn decision to build a life where I wasn't constantly bracing for impact. I went to a state university about 2 hours away. I didn't have some grand dream. I just wanted space. My first semester, I almost failed a chemistry class because I was still learning how to exist without being on alert all the time. I'd sit in the library and feel guilty for being safe. That sounds ridiculous, but it's true. When your nervous system is used to tension, calm feels suspicious. That's where I met Dr. Priya Desai. She wasn't my mentor in a cheesy, inspirational poster way. She was my professor for a research methods course, and she was the first adult in my life who didn't treat my quietness like weakness. I remember turning in my first paper and expecting the usual response I got from my dad. A critique, a joke, some dismissive comment. Instead, Dr. Desai wrote in the margin, "Your thinking is precise. Don't apologize for it." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and loosened a knot I didn't know was there. Over the next couple years, I worked in her lab. I learned how to speak in meetings without my voice going thin. I learned that being thoughtful wasn't the same as being fragile. When I graduated, Dr. Desai wrote me a recommendation that helped me land my first real job. We stayed loosely in touch, holiday emails, the occasional congratulations when I updated LinkedIn. She moved up in her field, eventually leaving academia for a corporate role. I was proud of her in that distant way you are proud of someone who helped you become yourself. So when my mom told me my dad's new boss was coming to dinner, I didn't think much of it. I imagined some generic middle manager who wanted to feel included. I even tried to be optimistic, which is embarrassing to admit. I thought maybe my dad was mellowing with age. He'd been unusually upbeat on the phone recently, bragging about his new job, telling me I should come see what real work looks like. Still, there was a part of me that hoped the night could be neutral, civil, a dinner I could endure without leaving with that familiar bruised feeling. Then I walked into my parents' dining room and saw her. Dr. Priya Desai, now just Priya, apparently because the corporate world strips titles off women like it's a sport, stood near the window, holding a glass of water. She looked the same but sharper somehow. Confident posture, calm eyes, hair pulled back neatly. She turned when she heard my mom introduce me, and her face did the quick flicker of recognition that made my stomach drop. "Jamie," she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. I froze with my coat half off. "Dr. Desai?" I blurted because my brain was still stuck in college. She smiled, small, real. "Priya now," she said gently. Then she looked past me toward my dad, who was booming in the kitchen about how he finally found a company that appreciates talent. Priya's smile didn't disappear, but it tightened, like she just noticed a crack in something. I tried to pretend it was normal, like my former mentor being my dad's boss was just a quirky coincidence. My mom looked thrilled, like this was fate trying to stitch our family into a nicer shape. My dad was in performance mode, slapping backs, pouring drinks, telling stories that always ended with him as the hero. He introduced Priya loudly. "This is the woman who recruited me, the big boss." And Priya nodded politely, letting him have the spotlight the way you let a child show you a drawing. At dinner, Priya sat 2 seats away from my dad. My dad kept angling his body toward her, as if the rest of us were just background. He told her about his vision, about how he'd turned departments around at his last job, a job he'd actually been fired from, but sure, about how he was finally getting the recognition he deserved. Priya listened, asked a couple questions, didn't feed his ego too much. I noticed that. People like my dad can smell flattery like blood and water. Priya wasn't giving him much. I stayed quiet, answering questions when asked, trying to make myself small, the way I always do around my dad. Priya kept glancing at me, like she was aware of an undercurrent. At one point, she leaned slightly toward me and said quietly, "It's really good to see you. How have you been?" Her voice was warm, normal, like she was offering me a life raft in a room that felt like it was filling with water. I told her about my job, my apartment, my recent promotion. Nothing dramatic. Priya nodded, genuinely interested, and said, "I'm glad. You worked hard." My dad overheard and laughed. "Oh, he always had a knack for making school sound like work," he said, and the comment landed like a pebble but still hurt. Priya's eyes flicked to him. She didn't laugh. My mom forced a chuckle and changed the subject to cake. Then came the candles, the singing, the whole forced cheerfulness routine. My dad stood up at the end like he was giving an award speech. He thanked everyone for coming, thanked my mom for putting up with him, thanked Priya for seeing his potential, and then, because he can't help himself, he nodded at me and delivered that line about mistakes. I wish I could say I was surprised. I wasn't. That's the worst part. It's like my body has a script for these moments. Heat in the face, hollow in the chest, a numbness that tries to protect me from feeling too much. What surprised me was Priya. She didn't scold him dramatically. She didn't stand up and lecture him. She just set her glass down very carefully on the table and said, in a calm voice that somehow cut through the room, "That's an odd thing to say about your child." The room went quiet again, deeper this time. My dad blinked, still smiling, like he hadn't heard her correctly. "What?" he laughed. Priya held his gaze. "Calling your son a mistake," she repeated, still calm. "That's not a joke I'd make." My dad's smile wavered. "Oh, come on," he said, waving his hand like he could swat her words away. "It's family humor. He knows I love him." Priya's eyes shifted to me briefly. "Do?" she asked, not accusing, not dramatic, just genuinely asking like she wanted to know the truth. My throat tightened. I tried to speak, but my voice got stuck behind everything I'd swallowed over the years. My mom jumped in, panicked. "Priya, he's just teasing," she said too fast. "You know how he is." Priya nodded slowly, but her expression didn't soften. "I do," she said, and the way she said it made my stomach twist because it sounded like she meant something more than this dinner. My dad laughed again, sharper this time. "Well," he said, forcing charm back into his face, "I guess the corporate world doesn't get our humor." Priya didn't take the bait. She looked at him and said, "The corporate world gets respect." My dad's jaw tightened. He glanced around the table, checking faces, tried to regain control of the atmosphere. My aunt stared at her plate. My uncle suddenly found his water fascinating. My mom looked like she wanted to disappear. And me? I sat there feeling 13 and 30 at the same time, the old shame mixing with a strange new sensation. Someone was naming the thing out loud. My dad cleared his throat, lifted his glass again, and tried to salvage it. "Anyway," he said loudly, "to another year." People murmured cheers like robots. The moment moved on because that's what families do. They push the discomfort down like it's trash you can hide under the sink. But Priya didn't forget it. I could feel that. After dessert, people started drifting into the living room. My dad cornered Priya near the hallway, talking fast, laughing too loudly, trying to reassert charm. Priya responded politely, but kept her body angled away, like she was already halfway out the door mentally. I stood in the kitchen pretending to help my mom with dishes, mostly because my hands needed something to do. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Step outside when you can." I stared at it, confused. Then another message. "It's Priya." My heart started pounding again, but this time it wasn't shame. It was anxiety, like what does she want? Did I do something wrong? Is my dad going to take this out on me? I told my mom I needed air and walked out onto the back porch. The night was cool. The yard smelled like damp grass and smoke from the extinguished candles. Priya stood near the steps with her coat on, phone in hand. She looked up when I came out. "Hey," she said softly. "I'm sorry." I didn't mean to make it worse. I swallowed. "You didn't," I said automatically, because that's my reflex to protect the situation, protect everyone else. Priya tilted her head. "Jamie," she said gently, "I'm not asking you to protect him." That sentence hit me like a small shove. I stared at the porch railing, fingers gripping the wood. "It's just how it is," I admitted quietly. "He's always been like that." Priya's expression tightened. "And your family just lets him?" I gave a small shrug that felt pathetic. "If you react, you're the problem," I said. "If you don't, he gets bored and moves on." Priya was quiet for a second. Then she said, very carefully, "I want you to know something. I didn't come tonight as a boss. I came as a guest. But I did just learn something about one of my employees that concerns me." My stomach dropped again. "Are you—" I started, panicking. "Are you going to—" Priya held up a hand. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm telling you because I don't like secrets. Your father has been presenting himself at work as someone with strong people skills, someone who builds culture. And what I saw tonight doesn't match that." I allowed a shaky breath. "He'll say it was a joke," I said. "I know," Priya replied, and there was something sad in her eyes. "People like that always do." She paused, then said, I also want you to know I remember you. You were one of my best students. Not because you were perfect, because you were honest. You worked hard. You didn't make people smaller to feel important. My throat burned. I hated how close I was to crying. I swallowed hard and said, thanks. Priya's voice softened even more. Do you have support? She asked. Friends? Someone who actually sees you. I nodded, even if it wasn't fully true. I have friends, yes. Support, kind of, but family wounds are weird. They can make you feel alone, even in a crowd. Priya took a breath. Okay, she said. I'm going to handle work as work. But I want you to be prepared. There may be consequences for him. Not because he's your father, because behavior like that bleeds into everything. He's going to blame me, I said quietly. It wasn't a fear as much as a prediction. My dad has always needed a scapegoat. Priya's face hardened slightly. Then that's also information, she said. And you don't have to carry it. She squeezed my shoulder briefly, professional, warm, grounding, and said, text me if you need a reference for anything. Anything. I mean it. Then she walked to her car and left. I stood on the porch for a long time after, breathing in the cold air, trying to decide what I was feeling. Relief, yes. Fear, yes. A weird grief, too, because Priya's reaction made it painfully clear how abnormal my dad's behavior actually was. When you grow up in something, it feels like weather. You don't realize you've been living in storms until someone from outside steps in and says, why is it raining in your living room? The fallout didn't happen that night. It happened slowly, like the cracks spreading after the impact. The next week, my dad called me. Not to apologize. He doesn't do that. He called to complain. Your little professor friend, he said, voice sharp, has been acting weird. I froze with my phone against my ear. Priya? I asked, even though I knew. Yeah, my dad snapped. She's suddenly all process and professional standards. Like she's trying to teach me how to talk. I've been in the workforce longer than she's been alive. I picture Priya's calm eyes. I could almost hear her saying, the corporate world gets respect. What happened? I asked carefully. Dad huffed. HR meeting, he said like it tasted bad. She said someone reported me for inappropriate remarks. Can you believe that? Like I'm some kind of villain. My heart thudded. Did you make inappropriate remarks? I asked, and my voice shook slightly because I knew this was dangerous territory. Dad went silent for a second. Then he laughed cold. Oh, I get it, he said. You told her. I didn't, I said honestly. She was at your birthday dinner. She heard you. Dad's voice rose. So you embarrassed me. No, I said, and I surprised myself with how steady it sounded. You did. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear his breathing, heavy, irritated. Then he said low, you always ruin things. That sentence hit the old bruise, the one that says, everything is your fault. For a second, I felt myself shrinking, instinctively preparing to apologize. Then I remembered Priya's text. I remembered Mom's face at the table, the way she didn't defend me. I remembered the quiet way my body had gone numb after being called a mistake in front of strangers. No, I said quietly, you ruin things. And you blame me because it's easier than looking at yourself. Dad made an angry noise. Don't talk to me like that. Then don't talk about me like I'm garbage. I replied. My throat burned. My hand was shaking. But I didn't stop. You call me a mistake in front of your boss. That's not a joke. That's cruel. Dad scoffed. You're so dramatic. There it was. The old line. The one that always tried to fool me back into silence. I took a breath. If you say that again, I said, I'm hanging up. Dad laughed, disbelieving. Oh, big man, he sneered. You finally got a spine because your professor friend is watching? I clenched my jaw. I'm not doing this, I said, and I hung up. My hand trembled so hard afterward, I had to set my phone down on the counter like it was a live wire. 2 days later, my mom called me with that careful tone she uses when she's trying to be neutral. Your father is upset, she said. I almost laughed. I know, I replied. He says you turned his boss against him, she continued. I took a breath, slow. Mom, I said, she saw who he is. My mom was quiet. Then she sighed. He's under stress, she said, which is her way of explaining everything without excusing it, but also without stopping it. I was under stress my entire childhood, I said, and the words came out before I could soften them. My voice cracked, and I didn't call people mistakes for fun. There was silence. Then my mom said, very quietly, "I'm sorry." It wasn't a full reckoning. It wasn't a dramatic apology tour. But that was the first time my mom had ever said sorry to me in a way that wasn't immediately followed by but. A couple weeks after that, Priya emailed me. It was brief, professional, but warm. She said she hoped I was okay after the dinner. She said she couldn't share details, but she wanted me to know she took workplace culture seriously and she didn't tolerate humiliation disguised as humor. She also attached a link to a scholarship program at my old university and said, "If you ever want to mentor students, you'd be excellent." I stared at that email for a long time, not because of the scholarship link, because of the phrase humiliation disguised as humor. Seeing it named like that made me feel simultaneously seen and sick. Like, oh, that's what it was. That's what it's always been. My dad, of course, spiraled. He texted me random, jagged messages, half angry, half pleading. "Are you happy now? They're treating me like a criminal. You always thought you were better than me." He never once said, "I'm sorry I hurt you." He never once asked how I felt. The center of the story stayed him. Eventually, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and saw him standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered, like his posture had finally started matching his insecurity. "I could lose my job," he said immediately, like that was the only relevant fact. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. My heart was hammering, but I kept my face neutral. "Okay," I said. Dad frowned. "That's it? Okay. What do you want me to say?" I asked, and my voice was quiet but sharp. "You call me a mistake. You did it in front of your boss. And now you're here because your job is at risk. Not because you're sorry." Dad's eyes narrowed. "I didn't mean it like that," he snapped. "How did you mean it?" I asked. My voice shook slightly. "Explain it." Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked away, jaw working. "It was a joke," he muttered, weaker this time. I nodded slowly. "Then here's the truth," I said. "Your jokes have been cutting me for years. And I'm done bleeding quietly, so you could feel funny." Dad's face flushed. "You're making me out to be some monster." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him back. I just said, "You made yourself out to be that. I didn't invent it. Priya didn't invent it. You did it at the table like it was nothing." Dad's shoulders sagged, and for a second I saw something like panic. "I worked hard for this job," he said, voice cracking with anger and fear. "I finally got someone to recognize me." I stared at him, and something inside me softened, not into forgiveness, but into understanding. "I know you want recognition," I said, "but you don't get to build yourself by tearing me down." Dad swallowed. He looked at me like he was seeing a wall where he expected an open door. "So what now?" he asked, almost childlike. I took a breath. "Now," I said, "you stop talking about me like that. You stop calling me a mistake. You stop using me as a punchline. And if you can't do that, you don't get access to me." Dad scoffed, but it didn't have the same power. "You're giving me an ultimatum." "I'm giving myself peace," I replied. He stood there for a long moment, eyes flicking over my face like he was searching for the old version of me, the one who would flinch and fold and apologize for existing. When he didn't find him, he looked angry again. "Fine," he snapped. "Do whatever you want." Then he turned and walked away, shoulders rigid, like he was stomping off from an argument he couldn't win. I closed the door and slid down onto the floor with my back against it, shaking, not because I missed him, because standing up to him felt like lifting a car off my own chest. I don't know what happened at his job in detail. Priya never told me, and honestly, I didn't ask. But my mom later said he was put on a performance plan, which made me laugh bitterly because apparently the only language my dad understands is consequences that affect his pride. He's still employed, last I heard, but he's not strutting anymore. He's quieter. He doesn't invite bosses to family dinners now, which is probably for the best for everyone. As for me, the part that sticks with me isn't that his boss was my former mentor. It's what that coincidence revealed. Priya didn't do anything magical. She didn't rescue me. She just reacted like a normal, healthy adult would react to a father humiliating his child in public. And that reaction cracked something open in me. The realization that I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't dramatic. I was responding normally to something that was not normal. Sometimes I still hear my dad's voice in my head when I make a mistake at work or forget something small. See? Sensitive. But now there's another voice too, steadier, quieter, one I learned from people like Priya. Respect is not a joke. And every time I choose not to laugh along with cruelty, every time I choose not to shrink, it feels like I'm rewriting the script he tried to hand me. He called me the mistake at his birthday party like it was a punchline. It turned out the real mistake was thinking he could keep saying it in front of people who know what respect looks like and still be seen as someone worth trusting.